that it is useless and futile for us to continue talking peace and non-violence against a government whose reply is only savage attacks on an unarmed and defenseless people. And I think the time has come for us to consider, in the light of our experiences in this stay at home, whether the methods which we have applied so far are adequate.
From prisoner to president. In South Africa, during the brutal days of apartheid, a system built to divide black from white, rich from poor, power from people. But one man stood against it. For his defiance, he paid with his freedom. 27 years behind bars. His name was Nelson Mandela. But when he finally walked free from Robben Island, he didn't walk out with vengeance. He walked out with vision. A vision of reconciliation. A vision of a nation brave enough to face its past, not with denial, but with courage. Mandela was born in 1918 in a small village in the Eastern Cape. His birth name was Ruli-Halala. It means troublemaker. Fitting, wouldn't you say? He was a son of the Tambo royal family. His father was a chief and counselor to kings. But when his father died, young Ruli-Halala was sent to live with the acting regent of the Tambo people. This move changed his life. He attended the best schools available to Black South Africans at the time. At one of these schools, a teacher gave him the English name Nelson, making it much easier for the rest of us to pronounce it. As a boy, he listened closely to tribal elders, shared stories of courage and resistance. He said later, those tales awakened in him a longing for freedom and for justice. In Johannesburg, Mandela saw firsthand the brutality of apartheid. The laws were engineered to break the spirit of Black South Africans. He joined the African National Congress, the ANC, in 1944. Along with two others, he formed the ANC Youth League. They believed in nonviolent resistance, but apartheid didn't. So in 1960, after the Sharpeville massacre, where 69 unarmed protesters were gunned down, Mandela realized that change was going to be very difficult through peaceful protests alone. He felt compelled to help create the armed wing of the ANC, called the Spear of the Nation. That, of course, led to his arrest and to being sentenced to life in prison. Mandela's world shrunk to a 6-foot by 9-foot cell. He broke rocks in a lime quarry. He slept on a straw mat. And yet, he never stopped learning, never stopped leading. He studied law, smuggled messages in and out of prison, and continued his work. Prison guards began to respect him immensely. He became a symbol, a myth, a moral force. And 27 years later, the walls opened. It was February 11, 1990. The world watched as Nelson Mandela walked hand in hand with Winnie Mandela, tall, poised, smiling.
A day so many have waited for so long. The day Nelson Mandela was freed from prison. We start with the CBC's Jean-Francois Lepine.
There's Mr. Mandela, Mr. Nelson Mandela, a free man taking his first steps into a new South Africa.
Nelson Mandela emerged from his long nightmare as a simple man walking his way to freedom accompanied by his wife Winnie. But his release meant probably more to the whole world than to the man himself. In an unprecedented move, state-controlled television beamed Mandela's release live into the homes of millions of South Africans. Outside, crowds of supporters had waited hours for that very first glimpse of the man that most of them had never even seen.
He had every right to seek revenge, but instead he said, let's build a society built on justice, equality, and human dignity. He led South Africa through its first democratic election and became its first Black president in 1994. He didn't erase the pain. He invited it into the open. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission was born. Victims came to testify. Perpetrators came to confess. Some cried, some raged, but most forgave.
Inspiration by your courage and conviction during our lonely years on the island. Today, my return to Soweto fills my heart with joy. At the same time, I also return with a deep sadness, with a deep sense of sadness. Sadness to learn that you are still suffering under an inhuman system. The housing shortage, the school crisis, unemployment, and the crime rate still remain.
Moving on to 1995 and the Rugby World Cup. Rugby, a white man's sport. The Springboks, a symbol of apartheid. Mandela wore their jersey, walked onto the field, and presented the trophy, smiling beside the white Afrikaner captain, Francois Pienaar. The stadium roared, chanting, "Nelson, Nelson, Nelson." It was more than a game. It was the image of a nation choosing unity over revenge. One man, one gesture, one nation. Nelson Mandela once said, "I have walked that long road to freedom. I have tried not to falter. I have made missteps along the way, but I have discovered the secret. The secret that after climbing a great hill, one only finds that there are many more hills to climb." In 1985, while still a prisoner, Mandela was offered conditional release, but only if he denounced the struggle. His reply? A letter. He wrote a letter, and he said, "Only free men can negotiate. A prisoner cannot enter into contracts." The message was clear. Freedom could not be bartered for silence. That same letter, powerful and uncompromising, wasn't just filed away. It was delivered to the masses by his daughter, Zinzi Mandela. In front of a roaring crowd, she stood tall and read her father's words. Father in prison, a daughter in the front lines, a family carrying the weight of an entire nation's hope. But Mandela's mission didn't end with political freedom alone. He knew well that liberty without dignity, without bread, without jobs and education was but a shallow victory. He once said, overcoming poverty is not a gesture of charity. It is an act of justice. To him, poverty was not natural. It was man-made, and therefore it could be unmade. As president, Mandela focused on housing, access to clean water, healthcare, and education, striving to uplift the millions who had been pushed to the margins. He fought not just to end apartheid's chains, but to break the cycle of economic oppression it had left behind. His legacy reminds us that true freedom requires opportunity, that a nation can't be truly reconciled if its people are still suffering in silence.
Friends, I am privileged to be here today at the invitation of the campaign to make poverty history. As you know, I recently formally announced my retirement from public life and should really not be here. However, as long as poverty, injustice, and gross inequality persist in our world, none of us can truly rest. Moreover, the global campaign for action against poverty represents such a noble cause.
His journey reminds us that real leadership isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like listening. Sometimes it looks like forgiveness. Sometimes it looks like wearing the jersey of your former enemy. And sometimes it changes everything. Thank you for listening. This is Gloria Y, and this was a Panacea9 podcast, where we remember one world, one family. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and follow. Have a wonderful week. See you next time. Bye. From scattered fragments to global unity, healing our world together. What if a single moment could change the world? What if one voice could rise above fear against unimaginable odds? In a valley shadowed by conflict, where girls were told to stay silent, one girl raised her voice, not in anger, but in clarity, not for vengeance, but for education. This girl would survive an assassin's bullet, win the Nobel Peace Prize, and ignite a global movement. Her name? You guessed it, Malala Yousafzai.